So my title says Managing Self to Coach Others. It's important because so much is going on in our own brains when we coach. Are we nervous, frustrated, relaxed, or curious? So we're going to spend some time today tapping into that awareness and choosing how we want to show up in order to have the most productive conversations. Then we'll look at the power of questions. As coaches, we might want to impart information or perhaps clarify expectations. And often we do most of the talking. In truth, we want to talk less and get our employees to talk more so that they can learn by thinking things through and coming up with their own solutions. I'm also going to introduce you to a conversation flow, an easy way to ensure you won't go off topic, where you'll have the ability to have short, because we know time is tight, but effective coaching sessions. Let's start with how we show up and a little bit about how our brain works. So we judge all the time. It's how our brains are wired, but we also judge ourselves. Sometimes we're worried about what others will think of us. Will we make things worse if we bring up a performance issue? Will the person we're coaching come up with excuses that we're not sure how to handle? These are all things that can significantly impact the quality of our coaching, or worse, we might not coach at all. So notice what your brain is doing now. You're probably sitting comfortably, not feeling stressed, so you're able to listen to me, analyze what I'm saying. Think about how you might use the information that I share today. So your prefrontal cortex, or your thinking part of the brain, is activated. It's working well. You probably feel open-minded and ready to learn. But when we get stressed, the amygdala is activated and we move into fight or flight, which is the emotional part of the brain. We're not thinking well at all. And people describe this to me as the brain shutting down, can't think of what to say, or often blurt out the wrong thing. We don't want to be in this state when we enter into a coaching conversation. The interesting thing about coaching is that often our employees are nervous, so their emotional brain is activated as well. A recipe for disaster and not much progress. So what do we do about this? How do we tame our amygdala? When we worry or sense danger, we're thinking about ourselves and the impact the situation might not have on us. And it doesn't matter if the danger is real or not. Our brain doesn't distinguish between real danger and perceived danger. Those internal voices are casting doubts on our abilities, which are often not true. We might even visualize ourselves having a disastrous conversation. We have to reframe those stories or visions to identify what's important to us, move the focus away from ourselves and onto the person that we're coaching. We do this with a pause, calm ourselves, perhaps ask a few questions like, what's really important? How must they be feeling? How do I want to carry myself in this situation? Or we might visualize having a successful conversation. Either way, the pause serves to check in with ourselves to notice how we're showing up. It could be 5 seconds or a few minutes. We can be aware of the judgments we have about ourselves and others and how these are affecting us. Stephen Covey says, we think we see the world as it is, but we see the world as we are. And this often blinds us until we make an effort to see a different perspective. I have judgments about myself when it comes to coaching. I have to be careful not to be too nice and worry about people liking me at the expense of being courageous and helping them grow. I also have judgments about others that I watch out for. I might judge someone who is loud or likes to bring attention to themselves. And if I think back, I can remember my mom's influence to be humble and not stand out. So our upbringing, experiences, and past color how we see the world, but we are not always accurate. So what judgments are you carrying now? How are your judgments on yourself What are they? How might these be affecting your coaching? So I'm going to take us through a short exercise to give you an opportunity to make progress in whatever area is challenging you when it comes to coaching. So you'll need a pen and paper for this. So think about a challenge that you're having with coaching. Make sure the challenge is within you and not your employees. So it might be the fact that you're nervous about coaching, or maybe you get angry quickly, or maybe you find yourself doing all the talking and don't feel like you're getting anywhere. I'll give you a few seconds to think of something and write it down. Next, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to write as many questions as you can about this challenge. What do you need to ask yourself about this challenge? Don't edit your questions or scrutinize them. Just write as many as you can in that 2 minutes. So I'll put my timer on, and so go. As many as you can. Don't qualify your questions, just write them down. Keep going. You've got another minute. Just let the ideas flow. Let your mind go wherever it needs to go. Fifteen seconds. Keep going. Okay, all right. Now look at your questions. Is there a theme or perhaps a question that stands out that you need to consider more deeply? Or perhaps you even uncovered a solution to your challenge. The objective is to make progress. You might decide to take another 2 minutes to explore further, perhaps a different question. The other way you can use this exercise is in brainstorming. Say you have a challenge and you can ask your team to take between 2 and 4 minutes to write as many questions they can think of about that challenge. They will experience great independent thinking where everyone has an equal chance to explore their ideas. Okay, I hope you made some progress on your challenge with coaching. Let me tell you about a story about a leader I have worked with in the past and her challenge with coaching. So let's call her Gurmeet. Gurmeet was a director in a medium-sized organization and was struggling with a manager who she felt was ignoring her direction and making excuses about why things weren't getting done. Gurmeet was getting very frustrated and felt her manager was disrespectful and weak. She always complained that she didn't have time. She felt her manager was also passive-aggressive and didn't like her. See where the judgments come in. Does any of this sound familiar to you? So there is emotion on both sides. Gurmeet would relay her expectations and then she would get pushback. Her emotions kicked in and her natural tendency was to retreat. This is a lose-lose situation. The manager might think she has won because she pushed back and it worked, but in fact she lost because she's not making the progress that she should. And Gurmeet felt angry and discouraged about her ability to coach. So I find the most important thing is to step back and really decide what you want to accomplish from the coaching. Is it really an update on the work, or is there something deeper going on? Maybe their level of engagement, a behavior problem, or a problem with relationships. A few minutes of preparation can go a long way to keeping your coaching on track. Next, check in with yourself about biases you may have. What judgments are you making about this employee? What judgments are you making about yourself? How are these biases or judgments affecting your perspective in the situation? What is it you don't know? This is an important question because it puts you in a curious mindset. Now, if we consider what's going on with Gurmeet, her inner voice was saying, am I being pushy? What will she think of me? Am I being fair? And then, why bother? When she stepped out of her emotional brain and into her thinking brain, she realized she had been more than fair and wanted her manager to grow. But there's a problem with the relationship which is affecting the level of engagement. She needed to deal with the relationship before she could deal with the performance. This is a common trap that we fall into when coaching, focusing on the performance when there is a deeper problem with the person or the relationship. If we don't tackle the root of the problem, it will continue to fester and ultimately have a significant impact on engagement and the results the employee achieves. So let's take a look now at some of the different levels of engagement. When people are engaged in the blue, they tend to volunteer their highest effort and energies. These levels include creative excitement, heartfelt commitment, and willing cooperation. You can't buy these levels of engagement, but as a leader, you can create conditions where team members want to give their best. So what is it like to lead people who are in the blue levels? Now let's look at the gray. When team members are in these levels, they're choosing not to engage. Their energy can be negative. These include indifferent compliance, resentful obedience, or rebel and quit. And actually, they don't quit. They are in the workplace, but they've quit mentally. At some time in your career, you have likely been in all 6 of these levels of engagement. Where are you now? So engagement is highest when we feel we're a valued member of a winning team doing meaningful work in an environment of trust. Now, this is a mouthful, but ask yourself, are you creating this kind of culture for your team? Having regular coaching can create an environment of trust where you can find out from team members what their level of engagement is. What's impacting their performance at work? You can create conditions where team members choose to operate at their higher levels of engagement. And notice the word choose. This means they have control over which level they operate at. Where are your employees now? How many are in the blue and how many in the black? How can you impact this through coaching? What is it you need to know? Let's look at how you can explore this. Over the past year, we've seen how we worked drastically change. Many of us are working from home. Some have small children, dogs, cats, and all kinds of distraction. We've seen more of the person's whole life than ever before. But the whole person has always come to work, and each of these aspects of our inner self must be satisfied for us to operate in creative excitement. Let's look at each area. If we start with body, we ask, is the workplace ergonomically set up? Are there any health hazards? Is there a healthy level of stress? Can they physically do the job? Are they paid fairly for the work that they do? Even, are they an introvert or an extrovert, and how does their work environment support this? I know extroverts have had more of a struggle during COVID. So if something's missing, How will it affect their work? I once took a contract where I was working in a cubicle in a dark corner. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I was depressed, and I felt just a struggle to do my most creative and best work. And there is also some research now that shows people struggle with open concept, which has been popular for about the last 20 years or so. How would you rate your satisfaction in this area? The mind, of course, is important to everyone, but often different depending on the person. Some people want to learn all the time, to be challenged and stretched. Others want to keep to a routine and know what to expect. The manager's job is to gauge how much stretch each person needs in order to do their best work. Liz Wiseman has a great book called Multipliers, where she talks about giving a person enough stretch to make them uncomfortable, but also inspired. But it has to be okay to fail if you do this. Now, her book talks about how you can multiply the brain power in your team. Definitely worth a read. I remember a young man I once managed many years ago who challenged me more than any other because he was so demanding when it came to his learning. I had to actually plan to make sure he was challenged. Not surprising, he's a vice president in a large financial institution today. Are your employees stretched, or are they just going through the motions? Next is spirit. Does the purpose of the team, the vision of what they do and what they are to accomplish, inspire them? Are they clear on what it is? Does what they do matter? Does it line up with their values? Is it even discussed? Are the values of the organization lived, or are they just words on the wall? If this is missing, it's easy for people to do the minimum, but you will never get their discretionary effort. That effort they choose to give you. It's more than what they're paid to do. It's the long-term care worker who has always got a kind word and a smile when they deal with their patients, or this customer service rep who goes above and beyond after hours to solve a problem. Are you getting discretionary effort from your employees? Next, we have heart, which is all about the relationships people have at work. One of the most important relationships they have is with their boss. Does their boss listen, respect, and care about them? Gallup, who designs employee engagement surveys, has whittled their questions down to 12. One of those questions is, do you have a best friend at work? So how does the team support each other? Do they have a feeling of belonging? And there's been much discussion lately about bias, and research shows that belonging is even more important than security or success. What relationships do you have that need work? All of these aspects must be present for your employees to deliver their very best. But I find managers struggle to know which are present and which are missing. The best way to find this out is to ask them in a coaching session. So ask yourself now, what is missing for me in my current role? Body, mind, spirit, heart? Do I feel like I really matter? How do I get what I need? Now, I will often ask participants if they are using all the capabilities and potential they have in their current role. 100% of the time, they say they're not. What would be possible if you could tap into their potential? If we go back to our story about Gurmeet and our manager, I wonder what might be missing for the manager and quite possibly Gurmeet. We know there's something missing in the relationship, but what? Is there something else missing? This is where we get curious. It is the mindset of curiosity that replaces judgment and allows us to explore together in partnership rather than a power struggle. Now, we've dealt with the importance of how we show up in coaching, how we manage ourselves. Now, I'm going to move to some practical tips on how you can coach in a curious mindset. How we get started in a coaching session sets the tone for how the conversation will go. After you've reflected on what you want to achieve and make sure that you are in a curious mindset, you can begin your conversation with clarity about what you want to discuss. Now, you might think that Gurmeet wants to understand why her manager's not meeting the expectations of the job, but that will come later. The real issue is the relationship, what's not working between them, and how this is affecting her manager. So for Gurmeet's context setting, might start something like this. I've noticed we disagree with each other and are not finding good solutions when we're working together lately. And it's important to me that you feel valued and progress as a leader. I'd like to hear what you see and your thoughts on how we can work together more effectively. I hope you'll be completely honest with me, and I commit to listening to you. I may not always agree, but I know we're creative enough to find some common ground. Is there anything you would like to accomplish in our conversation before we start? Now, you might say it differently, which is fine, but you want to make sure you cover the 3 areas. What are we here to talk about? What do we hope to achieve? And then agree on how the conversation will go. It's important that you don't beat around the bush when you're having a performance conversation. The only reason why we beat around the bush is because we're uncomfortable. When you use the language, I notice that you're not judging, you're curious, you are saying what you're seeing, and whenever possible, be clear about what you're seeing, about the behavior. Now, just to be clear about behavior, let me do a little test with you about identifying behavior. So watch me. Now, many of you probably think, wow, I'm rude. Maybe I'm angry, exasperated. And I might be all those things. But the actual behavior is, I rolled my eyes and shook my head. So if you can start with, I noticed that, in a curious voice, you are less likely to encounter defensiveness. And speaking about disciplinary conversations, we should always attempt to have those as close to the time they happen and start with, I noticed that, in a curious way. So if you're worried about what you're going to say during coaching, you can relax. It isn't about what you say, but the questions you ask. Questions are powerful and keep you in the mindset of being curious. Your objective is to have them self-discover and develop their own solutions. And there's 3 types of questions. We're pretty good at closed-ended questions, and interestingly, we often think we're asking open ones when we are actually closed. Now, there's value in closed-ended questions when you need a quick answer. You often use closed-ended questions to clarify what a person is saying. So for example, do you mean this? Or if you are giving instructions or validating a commitment. Now, open-ended questions always start with what or how, and they require the person to give details. You use these questions when you're collaborating during coaching. You might be solving a problem. You might ask questions like, what do you think? What ideas do you have? How do you think you should approach this? Then we have thought-provoking questions that ask the person to step back and ponder, perhaps see things in a different light. And then we listen, and we might see things in a different light. Thought-provoking questions often to relate to those 4 areas, the whole person: body, mind, spirit, heart. We might ask questions like, when have you felt most successful? What is important to you about this? I've noticed that you've been quiet lately. What are you thinking? What's challenging about the relationship? What's the impact? What skills in your current role are you not using to their fullest? If you keep a calm and remember it's not about you and are curious, it opens the door for an honest conversation. Now, people often use the why question, which is okay, but it's important to ensure it does not come across intimidating. So you might ask the question like, how is this really important to you? Or why is this really important to you? And then you're going to slow things down and pause. Make sure they're finished. I find some people don't need to ask much at all. I just pause and they will fill in the space. come up with their own solutions, and then of course commit to it. Or they might discover something that's holding them back, and perhaps in that body, mind, spirit, or heart that they did not realize. It could be life-altering for them. So this is where we say less to achieve more. Now let's go back to Gurmeet and her manager. Let's assume Gurmeet has created safety, has been clear about her context setting, and now she can move into some thought-provoking or open-ended questions. She might start with something as simple as, what challenges do you see? Now she's got to stop and wait for an answer. If there's not enough safety, she can work to create more by saying, I notice I get frustrated sometimes when we're coaching, and I realize I may shut you down. Pause. I'm open to your thoughts on this. Pause. If she still doesn't say anything, Gurmeet might ask, what holds you back from sharing with me? Or just simply, what's holding you back? The shorter the question, the better. It will keep you away from asking leading questions. And believe me, people are smart and they know when you're throwing out a leading question. The other tip I'll give you is only ask one question at a time. Slow things down, allow space between questions. If you need to rephrase, do so, but allow at least a 5-second pause. Once the manager starts to speak, Gurmeet will have a better idea on how to move things forward. So a conversation should always start with context setting. Then we move into thought-provoking questions or open questions to get the conversation started. As we develop solutions together and come to agreement on a plan, the questions become closed. It's like a funnel. So here's an example. I'd like to talk to you about your meeting, your behavior in the meeting. I noticed you rolled your eyes. What was going on in your mind? Open. What held you back from sharing with the group? Thought-provoking. What is the impact on others when they see you rolling your eyes? Thought-provoking. What might be a better option? Open. Then you can move to closed questions to gain commitment. So you have committed to share your thoughts on this at our next meeting and will refrain from rolling your eyes in future. Do I have that right? So there's your closed-ended question. Now, one question I often hear is, how can I help? Or what support do you need? And these are good questions. But if you ask them too early, you have just taken accountability for the problem. Hold that question until the employee has decided how they will take accountability, and then how can you support them? If Gurmeet had moved through this funnel, kept her emotions in check, and maintained a mindset of curiosity, she'd likely learn something about her manager she didn't realize. So this gives you some tips on how to handle those difficult conversations. Now I'm going to show you a flow for a one-on-one conversation. You can use this flow for one-on-ones either the mid-year, year-end, or hopefully if you have regular one-on-ones through the year. We would start with context setting as we did earlier and then move into the coaching flow. If it was a year-end review, you might start with something like this. What are you most proud of last year? Open-ended. What skills did you develop in this project? Thought-provoking. What else did you learn? Thought-provoking. What else are you proud of? Then you might add to and validate their accomplishments. So you might say, you completed the project on time and the quality was much better than I expected because ... Or I noticed you worked with the marketing department and delivered a successful plan to the field, which is not part of your goals, but had a significant impact on our bottom line and customer service. Pause, and then have more discussion about that. Do you see how this is validating and will develop confidence? Then you can move to developing skills. You might say something like, what would you like to learn next year? What skills would you like to strengthen? What projects would help you develop these skills? What learning from last year will you integrate into this year? Then you can move into, here's what I'd like to see, which gives you the opportunity to identify improvements you'd like them to make that they have not already identified. So at this point, you can move into goal setting and set some timelines along with what support the person might need. It's also important to connect each coaching session so that you would always review progress of the goals set in the last session. You can see how Gurmeet and her manager could use this model, but not until she's resolved the relationship issue. So it's important that we choose the right kind of coaching for the right situation. So I hope you can visualize how you've been showing up for coaching and have ideas on how you can enhance your mindset to be a more effective coach. I encourage you to take the stress off yourself and allow silence so your employees can think for themselves and become less dependent on you. You will do this by asking questions with pauses. And then you can use the conversation flow to help your employees make progress in your formal coaching session. So I'll share some of my favorite authors with you. And that concludes my presentation. So Abdul, I think you may have some questions for me.
Thank you, Caren. That was excellent. I was making a few notes along the way as well, and I can think of a few that would probably be that would benefit from this as well. So this is great. We do have some questions that have come in as I look to my other screen and see to those. And I think you might have addressed some of these pieces. But here's a question that's asking for what may be the best ways for preparing for a coaching conversations. And this is looking for both sides, the manager, if you will, and then or the coach and the coachee. How many each of them prepare for a session?
Well, as a manager, as I said, really understand what you want, objectives that you want to achieve in the coaching session. And sometimes you may ask the employee what would they like to talk about. And that's always good because it gives you a sense of what's on their mind. And then typically I would always have a few questions prepared, have short questions so that you don't start out by doing all the talking. You start out with a question. And for an employee, I think that I would have some questions. What is it that you need to know? What kind of feedback are you looking for? What can the manager do to pave the way for success for you? So a few things that you can think about prior to your coaching session.
Excellent, thank you. And what about the coachee? How might they prepare? So they've been called in, if you will, into a coaching session. They're anticipating elements, but what might be the advice for them?
Yeah, for the coachee, it would be asking what they need. So how can the manager pave the way for them? What is it they need in order to make their work more effective? What questions do they have? And again, what would they like to achieve? So it doesn't need to take a lot of time. It can be a 5-minute thought process, but it is important to do. You do want to come in prepared so that you've got, even if the agenda is not a formal agenda, you know what you want to accomplish.
Excellent. There's the next question here, and that builds on that. So what are some of the what are the key one-to-one coaching steps to avoid a client developing a dependency on a coach?
Okay. So you might have one of those conversations like, I noticed that you've been calling me 2 or 3 times a week, and I want you to be confident in what you're working on. Overall, what might the challenge be? So you could have a conversation. The other thing about dependency is typically people could become dependent when we always give them the answers. So my advice is, rather than always giving the answer, ask a question. And when you ask a question, people have to think rather than just getting an answer. And that will help them to hold that knowledge in longer and perhaps not need to come back to you. And they might think about, what is the solution prior to coming to you and just need validation. And that's something that I've always encouraged, is when people come to me, what should I do about this? And my question back is, what do you think? And that gets them thinking through the issue. And then often, once they figure I'm going to always ask them that, then they'll come and say, here's a problem. Here's what I think we should do about it. And then it's a validation.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Question here about the differences or advantages of coaching and mentoring, and how where each might play a role.
Okay. So they're very different. Coaching is really and the way that you would bring out a person's potential, in that you would ask a lot of questions and you would let them self-discover. So coaching is very much focused on the person's leadership. Mentoring is an expert who is going to impart their knowledge. So you could be both. You could be a mentor and a coach, but it's important to know which role you need to be in when you're coaching the employee.
That's excellent. Thank you. I've got a question, a point here in terms of, for those who are new to coaching or being coached, what might be some of the top tips in terms of perhaps your top 3 takeaways for them to focus on, Caren?
Okay. First is calm your mind. Make sure that you feel calm, and don't worry about what you're going to say. As I said in my presentation, prepare a few questions. And it's also really helpful to be a bit vulnerable. If you're a little bit uncomfortable, tell the person, I'm new at coaching. I feel a little bit uncomfortable, but I'm going to do my best and we'll figure this out together. That'll put you at ease. There's no wrong way to do it, as long as you are listening and asking questions and learning yourself.
Excellent. Caren, thank you so very much for coming here today and for sharing your thoughts with our viewers, and taking time out of your busy schedule, busy summer schedule, obviously, after the type of time that we've had, and of course, very much appreciating your presence here and sharing your thoughts on this important topic, as many individuals are transitioning from perhaps work from home setting into working back from office, or a hybrid model of sorts, whatever that may be the case. I think many of these elements that you brought up today would serve all individuals, whether they're being coached or they're coaches, will come in handy. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Goodman Group is a community-focused learning and development services provider that works to support professionals, businesses, and entrepreneurs pursuing growth through professional development certificate programs, executive education, consulting services, and startup support. Goodman Group's latest professional development programs are open for registration, in particular those that are being offered for the fall. If you liked and enjoyed today's Business Breeders session with Caren, and you're looking to further enhance your coaching, but perhaps more so your comprehensive management skill sets, and learn from Brock's award-winning faculty member and leading industry experts, then you might like to register for the Goodman Group's Professional Leadership Development Certificate program that is planned for this fall. And the details of that program and where you can register for that are on the screen. Do feel free to reach out to a member of the Goodman Group team in case of questions, registration, and or if you are looking for financial support and funding opportunities or discounts, which are all available for you and your team as well. I'm also delighted to tell you about our data-driven decision-making series. And the data-driven decision-making series focuses on effective decision-making and how business intuition can be complemented and enhanced by the key aspects of data and data science. The first session is business instincts with evidence derived from analytical sources. The two subsequent sessions are focusing on marketing and program and how to register and be a member of the Goodman Group team using the information that's on the screen. Tuning into today's
We seem to have lost you, Abdul. So perhaps I'll wrap it up. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today. And please, if you're interested, reach out to the Brock Goodman team and check out the website for more information about the upcoming business breathers. So thank you.